Good afternoon, folks. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're already a few minutes past the hour, and really excited about today's events and happy to have so many folks here in person. I'm told we have more than 50 folks joining online as well, so welcome to our virtual attendees. And by way of quick introduction for myself, I'm Darnell Cage. I'm an attorney here in town practicing in patent law, and I'm also on the executive committee of WILD. And before I tell you a bit about WILD and Westminster Town Hall Forum, just want to give you a brief overview of today's program. We're going to do a deeper introduction than I'll do for the panelists here, but I'd like to welcome and thank our esteemed panelists. Commissioner Alexander is here today. Deputy Chief Barragan is here today as well, and Sheriff Witt is here. So thank you all so much for your time, for the privilege of your time and presence here. We're gonna do it after meeting the panelists. We're gonna do an open table discussion in a panel discussion with the panelists, and then we're gonna do a closing and have a call to action by each one of our panelists here too. So you're here and you may be wondering what is WILD, this thing in front of me, and what is it all about? I am actually one of the folks who helped found WILD a few years ago in the wake of the killing of George Floyd. One of my partners and friends who helped me in those initial efforts is here today, Deidre Graham. Good to see you here. And we tasked an organization that we were a part of, Twin Cities Diversity in Practice, whose mission is to attract, recruit, and advance and retain attorneys of color here in the Twin Cities. We challenged us to do more than just programming. Thought we could do more than just programming in terms of putting our legal minds together and our legal prowess to work. There's near 80 now? Wow. Member organizations with law between law departments and law firms who have pitched into this effort and figured we could do more. And so that sort of birthed WILD. And WILD's vision is to create a Twin Cities community that is free of anti-Black racism and all forms of racism. And we do that by working with community organizations who are already here in this work. So we like to partner and come alongside organizations like Westminster Town Forum and do a lot of the work that they're already doing to see if we can inject any sort of beneficial efforts to that. So we help out legally and just with manpower and things like that too. And Westminster Town Hall Forum has a mission that's really aligned with what we just talked about with WILD. Their mission is to engage the public in dialogue on the issues of the day from an ethical perspective. And if you've followed WILD at all, you know that this isn't our first instance of doing this. We have many talks on this, but we're really excited about this partnership here. Westminster Town Hall Forum has had more than 300 public programs. The most important voices that have been here include Brian Stevenson, Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, Vice President Al Gore, Maya Angelou, and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, just to name a few. And TownTalks is the forum space for conversations with Twin Cities leaders on ethical issues specific to the Twin Cities community. So just like many forum programs, it's free and open to all in person and both online via live stream on YouTube, and we have a Zoom link as well. The good news is you can go back and listen to this. It's not it's in both the podcast form and on which you can access via the westminsterforum.org website. So with all that being said, I want to do a quick introduction of our moderator for today's events, Tane Danger. He's the director of this great forum. And just by way of brief intro, Tane's been doing this work for the past few years, since 2020. Has hosted, and before that he's hosted a Twin Cities-based show, The Theater of Public Policy, where he's interviewed the policy and political leaders at every level. Tane is actually a regular contributor to Twin Cities Public Television and a go-to moderator for public safety events and forums like today. And he's actually done a lot of work with WILD and TC Dip in the past. So please join me in welcoming Tane to the stage for today's events.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you all so much for being here. Welcome to Westminster and Westminster's Town Talk series. This is actually our first Town Talk since 2019 in person, I believe. So thank you all so much for being here. We're very excited to have you. We have a big conversation that we're going to have with three great panelists. I will say now, and I'll try and remind us a few times, I have some questions that are going to hopefully get a lot of our conversation going, but we also are very interested in hearing from you all, and there are cards on your table that you can use to fill out questions that you would like to ask of our panelists, and we'll be collecting those throughout the program and bringing them forward. So at any point, please write those down. If you've got one that's filled out, hold it up, and one of our friends from WILD will pick it up, and see, right back there, and we'll bring it forward for us. So I have this distinct honor of welcoming our fabulous panel to, wow, already a question, very good. All right, I have this honor of welcoming our panel to the stage, so I'm warning them because they're all in the back, but if you want to start circling around, it'll make it, you could do the Price is Right thing where you come all the way down, or you can come this way. So since she's first, and I believe that she's also traveled the farthest, I will start with St. Paul Police Department Deputy Chief Community Engagement, Pamela Barragan. She was born in, that round of applause. Yeah. She was born in Ecuador, and after finishing university, moved to Minnesota over 30 years ago. She was always deeply involved in the community, found a job with the St. Paul Police Department as a community liaison officer. She entered the police academy in 1999 and worked multiple assignments, including patrol, family violence, and liaison to Latino businesses. In 2005, she was promoted to sergeant, becoming the first Latina police sergeant in St. Paul history. In 2017, Pamela was promoted to commander, and in February of this year, Pamela was appointed as the new Deputy Chief of Community for the Engagement Division, becoming the first Latina in the St. Paul Police Department's history to obtain this rank. Please, a big round of applause. Come on down. Yeah, come sit next to me. All right, you're next up. So, Dawanna S. Witt was elected Hennepin County Sheriff. Okay. In November of 2022, she is the first woman and the first person of color to hold that office. In college, Sheriff Witt studied chemical dependency and family therapy, and her first jobs were in the nonprofit field. When she heard Hennepin County Sheriff's Office was looking for female detention deputies, specifically women of color, she decided to apply. And in 2004, after returning to school to become a licensed peace officer, Sheriff Witt was hired by the Dakota County Sheriff's Office. During her career at Dakota County, she worked in a variety of roles, including bailiff, transport, school resources, detective, crisis negotiator, recruitment coordinator, diversity and inclusion coordinator, and more. Ultimately, she became the first woman in the agency's history to reach the rank of captain. Sheriff Witt returned to Hennepin County Sheriff's Office in September of 2019 to take charge of the agency's largest bureau, adult detention and court services. In 2022, Hennepin County voters overwhelmingly selected her to be the next Hennepin County Sheriff. So please, a big round of applause one more time for Sheriff Witt. And last but absolutely not least, Dr. Cedric Alexander with the City of Minneapolis, Commissioner of Community Safety. Dr. Alexander is a law enforcement expert with over 40 years of experience in public safety, currently serving as Commissioner of Community Safety at the City of Minneapolis. Previously, he served as Deputy Commissioner of the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services and as an assistant professor at the University of Rochester Department of Psychiatry. He is a former national president of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, NOBLE, and he's the author of multiple books, including The New Guardians, Policing in America's Communities for the 21st Century, and In Defense of Public Service, How 22 Million Government Workers Will Save Our Republic. Please, a round of applause for Dr. Cedric Alexander. All right, good. Okay, that's good. Hi, everybody. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I have some sort of table-setting information that Wild and we helped put together just to sort of set the context, because there's a lot sort of, I imagine, people are thinking about and imagining we could do, and I felt like it was helpful to sort of do some baselining to get into this conversation to start with. So a few things. So we're kind of starting with the assumption that health of the community is dependent in large part on the safety of its residents. So safe neighborhoods and communities promote neighborhood connections, which is connected to things like housing stability and economic vitality. So serious crime rates in the Twin Cities region have risen over the past 4 years. However, they are at a lower level in some ways than they have been historically. Violent crime is particularly at a higher level than it's been in a decade. Property crime has ticked up since 2018, but remains at a lower level than in a previous decade. So this is kind of where we get into some of the relatively recent news. In 2022, the Minnesota Department of Human Rights released its findings that the city of Minneapolis and the Minneapolis Police Department engaged in a pattern and practice of race discrimination in violation of the Minnesota Human Rights Act. And MDHR worked alongside the city to develop a consent decree, a court-enforced, I want to get this right, a court-enforced, legally binding agreement to ensure reforms within the MPD. Following a comprehensive investigation, just last week, the Justice Department, the U.S. Justice Department, announced that the Minneapolis Police Department and the city of Minneapolis also, they found, engaged in a pattern and practice and conduct in violation of the U.S. Constitution and federal law. The department also announced that the city and MPD have agreed in principle to resolve the department's findings through a court-enforceable consent decree with an independent monitor. So I say all of that because I think that it is very valuable context, and it also gives me a chance to sort of tee up. We have different jurisdictions represented on stage today, and so while this, some of these facts are about Twin Cities broadly, some of the news pieces that we're talking about were about the Minneapolis Police Department. I think that it's very valuable to so us all figure out, like, what do we want to ask each of you about what your jurisdictions are exactly, so that we're not sort of pointing the wrong question in the wrong place. So maybe I'll just start with Sheriff DeWitt. Like, Hennepin County's a big county. Minneapolis is part of it, but can you maybe just set the table with what is the responsibilities of the sheriff's office in particular, and how should we think about that in this broader context of different law enforcement agencies and what they do? I think you're good.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
So it's Sheriff Witt, W-I-T-T, not DeWitt.
Sorry, my apologies.
That is okay. That is okay. Jurisdiction of Hennepin County is the entire county. The sheriff's offices have more statutory mandates than municipalities, such as the waters. We are responsible for patrolling not just roads, but the water. In cities and townships that don't have an incorporated police department, we are contracted to make sure that we provide those places with police services. We have the civil division, in which, for some people, that includes like evictions. It includes the court service documents. That's a sheriff's office mandate. We also have the jail. And Hennepin County has the largest jail in the state, the most populated jail in the state as well. And then, of course, there's patrol. But overall, the statute overall says that it is the sheriff's office responsibility to provide peace throughout the county. So when we have asked from our neighbors and our other jurisdictions within the county, the sheriff's office should when requested, provide services to make sure that we do preserve peace within the entire county.
And can we jump across the river in part to St. Paul and how St. Paul operates, again, sort of thinking about the city as part of a larger body within the Twin Cities?
Sure. So our city, we operate in the city.
That's helpful.
pretty
That's, we
basic.
all know that.
Yeah.
That's good, yeah.
So our jurisdiction is the city of St. Paul. We attend everybody that live, that play, that go worship, that visit our city. We provide services 24/7 like any other department. We have some partnerships with other police departments, but we are solely responsible for our city.
And can you say just a little bit more about your role in particular, and because it's new, just this year, you stepping into this, and what your responsibilities there are right now?
Sure. So my division is the Community Engagement Division, which has been in effect for the last 7 years. I am new to the position of Deputy Chief of that division. So what we do is our main mission is to make connections, make sure that we're hearing, we sure that we are seeing and hearing what the community needs for the police department. So we take an approach of we go and connect with the community and we learn from them. We listen, what is that they need from the police department? That is our main approach, making sure that those voices that maybe were never heard before, now they have an opportunity and an easy way to get access to the police department.
Thank you very much. Dr. Alexander, I will be honest, the one in particular, I was like, I felt like I knew before we started I could probably get by explaining a bit what the sheriff does, what the St. Paul Police Department does. Your role is one that is relatively new, and so I am curious, how do you, when you say to somebody at an event or something, this is what I do, how do you describe what your job is?
Well, first of all, let me say good afternoon and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you, with my distinguished colleagues next to me. The Office of Community Safety came as a result of a vote that took place in this city. And as a result of that, you now have a legislative branch and executive branch of city government. And out of that also, of course, out of that came this Office of Community Safety. Now, that is new to this community, not new to me, because actually I've been in this role when I was in Metro Atlanta a few years ago in DeKalb County. I have oversight of all public safety within the city limits of Minneapolis, which encompasses police, fire, 911, emergency management, and the Department of Neighborhood Safety. Probably many of you may have remembers being the Office of Violence Prevention, OVP. Those 5 departments with their chiefs and department heads, directors, report directly to me. I meet with them on a regular basis. One of my primary goals and directions I was given by the mayor were to bring these 5 public safety platforms together to make sure that they communicate, integrate with each other, and form not just one aspect of public safety, police, which we often refer to, but all those other 4 components that are so important to public safety. Oftentimes when we hear the term, we always think public safety is just about police. It actually is just not. It certainly does include neighborhood safety and 911 and emergency management and fire. But it also includes a host of other things which we may talk about later. So my job is to coordinate, provide the leadership and support for the continued health and welfare of this city, to help each one of those departments and their respective leaderships to do the things that are essential to make sure that you live in a community where you feel safe, a community that is vibrant, and a community that allows you an opportunity to feel like you can walk around here and feel a sense of safety and civility. Now, understanding we certainly do have our challenges in this city. I have been here 10 months, and we have seen a significant drop in violent crime as a result of some things the Office of Community Safety has put in place, such as Operation Endeavor, and such as over the course of this weekend that's coming up, where we have Operation Swift Summer that is going to, yeah, I know. Swift Summer. Hope it goes by swiftly. But the downside to that is I'm from Florida, so winter will come very quickly. But that being said, and I'll stop here, but that being said, Operation Swift Summer is really a phrase I coined to help get us through this week with the coordinated efforts of partners like Sheriff Witt, like the commander from St. Paul, and all the other law enforcement assets in and around the metro area. We all will be working together so that people can go down, have a good time doing the concert, have a good time doing the Pride Festival. And because I think what's really important, certainly have been important to me, is to be able to get people to come back into this city. And people are beginning to come back into this city and feel safer. We still got a lot of challenges,
Right.
but it's a little bit at a time. I'll stop there.
No, I appreciate all of that. And you mentioned the challenges. We planned this event a long time ago. We didn't know that the Justice Department is going to release this large report last Friday. But talking about your role and this coordination that you're doing, having these pieces, can you talk about why that is a valuable way to address some of the patterns and practices, some of the problems in the misconduct in places like MPD that hopefully, I think everybody is hoping that we're making progress and changing. How are you part of that?
Well, you know, I think what's important here, yes, we do have MDHR agreement, which we have signed with the state to make some changes around reform in terms of the way that we do business. And then on top of that, from a federal level, we have more recently now a consent decree in which we will be engaging and negotiating with the U.S. Justice Department. And primarily, you know, speaking specifically to consent decrees, they are not new. There are a number of departments across this country that have experienced consent decrees, and they generally arise out of the fact there has been grave evidence, supportive evidence over an extended period of time of individual rights being violated, people being treated unfairly and justly under the U.S. Constitution, and acts of behavior that were considered to be gross and unbecoming. And this is how we got into this predicament. And the challenges that this community here in Minneapolis around police has suffered really started before George Floyd. There have been some systemic problems that have existed for a long time under a lot of different mayors and under a lot of different police chiefs. And now we're in a place where we have an opportunity to sit with the federal government, to sit with the state, to look at some of these reform measures that we're going to make in order to help build these relationships, enhance public safety, get these officers the kind of training that they need, also the type of mental health wellness interventions that they may need as well, considering the work that they do.
Sheriff Witt, if I can ask you, you're also been in the job now just since January. What are some of the things that you came in and you're like, these are the things that I really want to make sure I'm getting done in my first term?
Well, you know, it builds around that word culture, right? Every agency has a culture. And even though I started my career at Hennepin County and going to Dakota County and then coming back to Hennepin, you know, I use a lot of my lived experiences and interactions, whether it's my personal life or my professional life. What is it that we need? The one thing I've never done is lost my connection with community. And so, you know, knowing with my upbringing, which I was raised in South Minneapolis, knowing some things just never changed. But I could tell you what made it difficult for me as a woman and a person of color in this field is it's the same things that I've been saying throughout my tenure in law enforcement. But I had learned something along the lines, which is some things you can't teach. People have to have those experiences. So with that being said, my priorities was, okay, what do we need to deal with right now in order for people to be able to thrive in their communities? That include reduction of the violent crime. That is a priority. We have to, because no matter what else you do, if you're not working on that, things will continue to fall apart. The opioid crisis, prevention and education, working on that. But you know what? So there's those two things I listed first. You know, but there's a simple math problem here too. My third priority is recruitment and retention, because if you don't have the people to do this work, none of it will get done. So that has to be a priority.
Has that been hard?
Oh yeah, it's been very difficult. I can tell you today, just getting in the office at 7:30 to the time I got to this meeting, I got 3 more letters of resignation or retirement. It is. It's been very tough. You know, making this field attractive to people is a lot of work, especially now. But you know, one of the things when I talk to people about it, it's like, well, you're saying what you need, you're saying what we want. If not you, then who? So this is all of our problem, where we all need to be a part of how do we get more people to apply for this job, the right people, with the right qualifications, with the right core values. It's needed, you know. As I mentioned earlier with the first question, you know, having jurisdiction within the county. Okay, Hennepin County, near 1.3 million people. The asks aren't slowing down. They're not. So how do we provide service, continue to provide service, and at the same time making sure we're looking at officer wellness, making sure we're not burning out our people? Which brings me to that 4th initiative, which is collaboration. There is no one person or no one agency, no one community that can do this by themselves. We have to collaborate, you know, as the force multiplier. So you know, with those initiatives, again, reduction of violent crime, collaboration, recruitment, retention, the opioid crisis, which is killing our people, our neighbors every day. And that's not getting better. You know, the 2022 statistics aren't out yet, but once they are reported, we are sure that it's going to be probably near double what it was in 2021. We can't pick and choose which of these to be one priority. We have to be willing to have people that can multitask and know that we have to be looking at all of these things because they're all connected.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I did add a new bureau to our agency, and that's our Community Outreach Public Affairs. You know, since 1960-something, the Sheriff's Office hasn't had a unit that actually worked on community engagement. And as someone who grew up in South Minneapolis, you know, something that I've been very verbal about is it's a surprise that I'm in this field because I did not like police and I didn't trust them. And it wasn't because I was raised that way. That was because of my own interactions and what I saw. So, you know, I live every day trying to say, I want to be who me and my siblings needed to see. And so it's you using those lived experiences, and again, everything that I learned along the way. You know, when people ask, what are we missing in leadership? My question was people who care about the work. It's not just a job, and that's the kind of leader I am, and that's how I will continue to lead the Sheriff's Office to ensure that we are doing the right thing for the people that we have taken an oath to protect and serve.
Commander, is that the correct way to? Deputy Chief, sorry, Deputy Chief.
Pamela, doesn't matter.
Deputy Chief, I will say.
My bad.
That's okay, no problem.
Deputy Chief, your role is in community, is to build those relationships. I'm wondering, again, like following up on what the sheriff said, if the challenges of that, what you're hearing, and sort of where you're finding, I don't know, pathways to build some of those relationships.
Sure. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be open to be able to be yourself, right? So you cannot make a connection with a community if they don't see you, if they don't trust you. You cannot represent the community if in my force is not representation of who is the community. So when we go and talk to people, we try very hard to be intentional, because we have to have the purpose of giving them the voice that I mentioned before, right? Opening those spaces so they feel that they belong there. So when we do that, we use different resources. Like we have a Career Path Academy, which we go and we actually recruit people from underrepresented communities. We help them to go to school, we pay them to go to school, we pay them to come and work for the police department in community events. We teach them what the police department does, and they are the ones who go out there and they help us to do the recruiting, to do the outreach, because now they're representing those communities that need to see somebody like me or like us in this kind of uniform. The other things we do is also we have a really strong recruitment team where they go to their traditional recruiting, will be like colleges, when people know that they want to be police officers, that they go there. But we also go to the schools, we go to sometimes we stop by at the parties or at the Cub Foods, at the grocery stores, at places where the community gathers. We go to churches, we go and say, here, this is the St. Paul Police Department, these are our values, this is what we bring to you. Would you like to join us? Because if they don't know us, they're not going to say, oh yeah, I want to be like that person. So we have to be very intentional in how we are recruiting. And I think one of the big things that our department does, we just not recruit the person that's gonna wear the uniform, we will also recruit the family. Because we have to make sure that the family is the support system that is going to maintain or keep that officer healthy. So the family has to be on board and understand the challenges of being a police officer. And we recruit a lot of underrepresented communities. Some of our cadets are the first generation in their household, they go to college. So they don't have somebody in the household that can help them navigate those systems, but they have that support in the police department. So at the same time, we have to give that support to the family, so the family understands what is the mission and our calling to be a police officer. We are called to do this profession. We are servants. To do this, you have to be a servant at heart, and not everybody is meant to do that. So that's why we are focusing on recruiting is a little different than other departments.
I really appreciate that, and that's I think that's going to resonate, and people appreciate this, and it's important to point out, and I don't have to tell you all, we're at a very hard moment for this, right? And I've just got these statistics here, so I'll read it. There was a Gallup poll last year that found that only 45% of American adults have confidence in police law enforcement right now, and that was down from a previous low. And that only 30% of BIPOC residents have a great deal or a lot of confidence in police, which is obviously much lower than that. And so I hear all of this, and then I'm also wondering if there has to be something else that changes, something else that is done differently internally as well as externally in order to meet this particular moment that we're in.
Yeah, I can respond to that. I'm glad you raised that question. Everything you heard my colleagues say here is absolutely correct, and I agree with them wholly. I think one of the biggest challenges we're going to have to begin to think about is this. The rate in which we used to hire police officers is a challenge across the country. We certainly do feel it over here. I don't know about St. Paul. I can't speak specifically, but certainly around the country. I follow this stuff. I write about this stuff. I lecture about it all the time. And what we're facing is a younger population of young people who are choosing something else to do other than policing. It doesn't make them any different than my generation as a baby boomer or someone else's generation X or whatever. It's just that we have young people who have a different interest, who grew up very differently, who experience and see and feel the world very differently than which I did in my generation, and many of you that are out here in this audience. And we have to accept that notion that if you put out an advertisement for police now, there was a point in time they'll line up from here to the expressway. Well, that don't happen anymore. And that's not going to come back around that way. I think eventually we're going to do some recruiting, but I think also think how we police in the future is going to be very different. We're going to have to be very specific about what it is we want our police officers to do. They can't do everything. They can't be everything to everyone. So we kind of got to redefine what it is, what are their roles, what kind of calls for service that they're going to respond to. I'm down 350 police officers in Minneapolis Police Department. That's post the pandemic and, of course, post civil unrest. We went from 800 officers to down today around 515. That is huge. anywhere on the planet to lose that many personnel in a very, very short period of time. But yet and still, one of the biggest challenges, and I think both the chief, the deputy chief, and the sheriff will agree with, is just trying to retain what we have is also a challenge, because we're not bringing young people into the profession as quickly. We have those that are reaching retirement age of 25 and 30 years that are going out. So actually we have oftentimes more that are leaving than we do coming in. So what does that mean for public safety in the future? It means a couple of things. We certainly got to redefine how we police in this country. We also have to be able to think about it this way as well, is that people have a very different expectation of public safety today. People want to be able to see inside their police department, inside their sheriff's department. They want to know what your policy and procedures are. They want to know why you do things the way that you do. Why do you chase? Why do you use deadly force? Why do these things? People in my generation didn't ask these questions. And many of your generations didn't ask these questions. But people are asking these questions today. People want to know, and they should know. Because these police departments don't belong to me, they belong to you. Those that elect us and put us in these positions, those that appoint us and put us in these positions, these are your public safety departments. And you have a responsibility to have a voice, and you have a responsibility also to partner with your local law enforcement, because this is not solely a job just for police. This is a job for all of us. And as you heard the sheriff say a few moments ago, it's that force multiplier. It's all of us working together. And even though the sheriff has limited assets, I have limited assets, but when we put our assets together, even with our friends across the river in St. Paul, we are greater for it. We do a better job for it. Because here's the thing. The only thing that separates us is this imaginary line called a jurisdiction. If you remove that line between the county and city, and between the city and the next adjoining city, St. Paul, we're all a part of the same geographical area. You take those lines away, people move, bad guys move in and around. They don't live in boundaries. We operate by boundaries, but they don't operate in boundaries. So for us, we can no longer be singularly Minneapolis Police or singularly Hennepin County Sheriff's Office or St. Paul. We really have to work together, communicate together, share assets, share resources, share personnel, because really that is what's keeping us going in the city, is the help we receive from our partners, and very specifically and notably from our sheriff's office, from our state police, from our St. Paul friends and others. So it's two things that I know that we're going to have to do going into the future that's going to be huge around public safety, because we're not going to get these numbers back as quickly as we want to. They may come back one day, but it ain't going to be tomorrow, and it ain't going to be next week, and it ain't going to be next month. So we got to learn how to utilize what we have. So it means we got to recruit different. We got to put more money into recruiting. We have to find new ways in which to attract young people into this profession. But I know two things that are going to be hugely important. One is we're going to have to enhance our technology, which is out there for us to be able to utilize, so that through this technology we can identify, we can apprehend, and we can take people off the street that could be very dangerous to our community. We also have technology out there that helps us to prevent crime, so that we never get in that position in the beginning. And the second most important thing we're going to need to do as we go forward, we're going to have to bridge and continue to work towards building these relationships between police and community. None of the three of us or anywhere else in this country, I should say, can do this job without the support of community. Your community, your neighborhood, and I don't care whether you live in the city or you live in the suburbs, you're only as safe as the partnership between you and your local police, your local sheriff, your local state police, or whatever jurisdiction you may reside in. That's the strength of public safety today. That's the only way we're going to stay safe today. I've been asking people for the last number of months, with the help of our corporate sponsors, our corporate friends and neighbors and neighborhoods and communities, we need to get people to come back into this city. This is a beautiful, dynamic, wonderfully historic city. And you had a couple of incidents that created a setback. One was civil unrest, and the second was a worldwide pandemic that affected all of us across the globe. But we can recover from that. But you know, one of the most troublesome things for me when I first came here 10 months ago, and I would sit in audiences just like this, and people would say to me, well, Commissioner Alexander, why do you want to come to Minneapolis? We're crime-ridden, nobody comes downtown. All these negative statements. And it made me question, yeah, I guess, why do I want to come to Minneapolis, right? But I understood why people felt the way that they did, because oftentimes we have had things so well, so long, we forget and we take for granted the things that are most important to us. And then we recognize the arts and theaters, the beauty, the history of this city and everything around it. We become dismayed because we have a couple of major events that occur, but we can overcome them. But we cannot overcome them through negativity, because part of a crime fighting strategy for me is the more people I have in this city, that becomes a crime fighting tool. That's why we need to encourage people to come into our city. You're going to and feel safe in our city. But be aware of your surroundings and where you are, just like you would anywhere in any community. But this is a dynamic city, and what's going to save this city is not going to be the three of us. It's going to be us and you, all of us partnering together, because that is really where the strength of public safety is going to be today and in the future. It's not just going to be having 200 or 300 more police officers.
Right.
It's going to take far more than that.
So thank you for all of that. So I hear all of that. Jane Jacobs and most of the people who are coming downtown would very much agree with you on, like, more eyes on the street are good. I have to imagine that there's a lot of people in the audience that are thinking, though, and does policing need to change somehow, too? Does that need to be different? And we've gotten some audience questions on that already. People are asking things like, how would each of you define community policing and examples of programs and initiatives? Different ways of partnering with the community. So I hear all of those things. I know we've talked a lot about recruitment and rebuilding the forces back to levels that maybe they were at or they need to be at. And fundamentally, does something about the way that the culture, the operations happen, need to be different?
It is, and it's, at least for our department, it has been changing. We are transparent, right? We want to make sure the community knows what we're doing. So I can speak for my city and for my chiefs. They've always been very proactive in reaching out and opening those doors for our community to come and see what we do. We are more intentional now with the new chief, because we realize that the younger generation, they have a lot of questions, right? And older generations, we don't like to be questioned, right? It's like, no, that's what I said. Why you said that? It's like, because I said so, right? But like it or no, we are the ones who have to change. Our departments have to change because our police force is changing. They're new, so we need to adjust to embrace those changes, to embrace those questions. So there's nothing wrong with somebody that's younger, especially the table in the front, to ask those questions, because that put us in check. Because maybe we have always talk about having blind spots. They are going to continue being blind spots unless somebody points them out. And then when somebody says, hey, what about this? Or have you looked at it this way? Then for us as a department, we have to look at it. So we're constantly looking into our processes, into our policies. how do we need to change things? How do we train our officers? Looking for different ways to open those spaces, like I said before, to the community to come and see. So as I stated in the beginning, we need to be vulnerable, to be open, because we work for the community. Without community, there's no police. Without police, there's no community. We're not opposite to each other. We're not contradicting each other. We are part of each other. So we need to find those processes and find those opportunities to do that.
If I can just add to that, too. So, transparency. I think as a profession as a whole, we have to admit that we treated this profession as if it was a big secret for so many years. We did not allow people in, it's like, and then Google came around. I used to be an Explorer advisor for many years, and I remember we learned of an East Coast police department, I believe it was like New York. We found out that their Explorers, which is a program for 14 to 21-year-olds, were first-time juvenile offenders. And us in the Midwest, like, they're gonna teach them how to be better criminals? That's what we thought. But you know what? They were actually ahead of the game, because what they were doing is they were building relationships with those kids. Kids, they do what they do. They stretch those boundaries. But you know what? When they invited those young adults, those juveniles into the culture of policing, you'll notice that their recruitment went up. But here we weren't willing to do that. So I kind of snuck a little bit of what they did, and I invited into our Explorer post when I was at Dakota County just to try it out, a couple of first-time juvenile offenders. And it didn't go over very well with people, right? But guess what? Both of them are now my partners. So it was taking risk, doing things different, right? And guess what? Only people that I try to convince that I'm perfect to are my 2 daughters and my 2 grandkids. Other than that, I'm not perfect, but we can't be afraid to take risk in this field when we're trying to do the right thing. When we talk about being community policing, that's more than knowing your beat. Once upon a time, if you didn't know your geography, you didn't pass the program and you could not be a police officer. That brings me to an experience with one of our deputies where I had to pull him off the road because we couldn't see what he was doing. Like, he didn't have the numbers, the stats. And this deputy, when we told him we were moving him because he wasn't productive, he said something to me that I would never forget. And he goes, "You ask those young deputy who lives at this address, who owns that business, who knows the people in their community." We didn't have tools to reflect community engagement. We weren't gauging that. So that's something else that we did. We got better with that.
Are we doing better? I mean, do we have some of those tools now, do you feel like, or are we still needing to build those?
Well, that's a 2-part question, or a 2-part answer for me.
Sure.
We always can do better, and we have to build them. We have to know what we're looking for. But at the same time, has anybody ever been in a room where you could tell that one person who really did not want to be there, and then they just gave off those negative vibes? We have to have people who understand the importance of community. I said earlier, there's some things you can't teach. People just have to experience it. When we're asking young people to go out there and police people around experiences that they've never had, the only way they're going to get to do that is if they're actually engaged. And that word can't be thrown around lightly, right? In 2004, when I went to Dakota County, I loved working at Hennepin County. And, one of the things I share with people all the time is, like, I didn't leave because I wanted to leave. I loved where I worked. But when I went back to school to become a licensed peace officer, and I put in several times trying to get promoted to a licensed peace officer, and then it wasn't happening, so I'm also that person, worse than a 5-year-old. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. Tell me what I need to do to reach my goals. I was asking all the questions. Well, I happened to overhear a conversation that wasn't meant for me to hear. And that was, she knows too many people from the community that comes to jail. She has family members that come to jail. The last line, we can't trust her. So, here we go. If you forward 20-something years later, what are we asking for now? We are asking for people from the community who knows their community to do this work. But so see how the lenses just changed? Because again, that was 23 years ago. I'm 25 years old, if anybody's doing the math. But, but those are the kind of experiences that, we have to remember, and it happened. But that was one of the best things that happened because I loved all my time at Dakota. But you take those tools, right? Okay, now how can I affect change so that doesn't happen to the next person? Engaging. You're right, I did know a lot of people that went to jail. And if I didn't see them, they saw me. Dawanna, or whatever. But you know what? I was also that person that they would call when we had somebody who was difficult to deal with to talk to people. So then we're talking about communication, right? So you're in these difficult situations. Do you have people with the skills to actually not only want to be there, but how do you communicate to people, especially if they're people that look different than you or come from a different background than you? When we had all of the unrest downtown, that was I'd never cried so much in my career. But, I was going outside and I was talking to people and I was being called some of the worst names, oftentimes by people that looked like me. But I never felt so low in my career. And that was because I felt so disconnected from the community that I love. And so, but I'm like, nope, I got to keep going back out there. At this point, I'm a major. My job supposedly is behind a desk. I've never been good behind a desk. I'm good with people. And I'm like, I need to be out there. And, somebody took note of that, a reporter, and he said, can we just interview you? And I'm sitting here and I'm talking to this reporter about everything that's going on in the community. And he puts his pen down and he kind of looks at me like this. And he goes, I've been doing this for a long time, and you don't answer these questions like any cop that I've ever talked to. And I told him about how I got to be where I'm at. And so he calls me that night and he goes, well, the editor doesn't want to talk about the unrest. He wants us to do a story on you. And that was uncomfortable for me because you mean let the whole world, like I can do conversations, but let the whole world know how I got to be where I'm at with the background that I came from, because I had a lot of barriers to overcome. And ultimately I did that story. And you know what though? I started feeling good about it because I never got so many calls, emails, text messages from people that were saying thank you. You know why that is? Because I was vulnerable and I let people in. Because right now, or at that time, all people saw was a uniform and a badge, and that was a barrier, which is something I can understand because I was that person. There was a time in my life you couldn't tell me that there was a single good cop. I was that person. But I also know through my experience, what I tell people was an accident, this job being an accident, I was like, no, that was my purpose, and God just forgot to tell me what he was doing because I was really confused. But it was working as a detention deputy, working with other officers, other deputies. I had to talk, I had to engage, I had to interact. And that is how I learned, like, wait a minute, they're not all bad. They're not all out to get me. It had to be through interactions, and that's why I am a huge advocate for community engagement, because I was that person. And nothing could change that but experiences to alter my way of thinking.
Do you... Yeah, I've gotten a few questions here about, someone used the term hiring the right people, and we've talked a lot about trying to bring these right people in. And at the same time, all of you have talked about it's a crisis to try and get enough of those people to serve in these roles. So this question is asking about how you are trying to get those right people with the right values. If you feel like you have the tools to do that. And then they also asked rather pointedly how it works hiring people into some of these police departments after something like this DOJ report comes out that talks about the patterns and practices of racially discriminatory practices and whether that makes it harder.
So I think a couple of things here. One, going forward, we all are going to have to be very intentional in terms of the type of young people we want to bring into this profession, or people we want to bring in this profession, period. I grew up at a very different time in American history.
47, right?
Yeah.
47, you
Yeah,
said?
40.
27, sorry, my apologies.
27. But I grew up in a very different time. I'm 68 years old, so just so you know. Yes, I look good, I know. But I'm 68 years of age. I'm a baby boomer. I grew up in the South, grew up in the deep South in Florida. And certainly my era of how I experienced this country was basically very black and white. I never knew I had a gay friend until I was 40 years old. Because during my era, if someone was gay or if someone was outside of being white or black, they were severely ostracized. And even in my own community, you know, if someone was gay, they were ostracized in the 60s and 70s. And if you did, you kept it to yourself, you didn't tell anyone. And we learn these prejudices and biases along the way. We all do. For me, it was one thing. For someone else, it could have been around race. For another person, it could have been around gender. It could have been around religious affiliation or sexual orientation, whatever the case may happen to be. We all didn't grow up in perfect families. We grew up in families where we got these messages and signals, and we later learned, hopefully as we matured and grew through life, that some of the things we learned and took away from home were not right. Hopefully we learned that.
I apologize for cutting you off. It's just we have limited time. And
yeah,
so
but I need to finish this.
Right now, do we have those tools, the ways that you need to recruit
Well, I got to put it in context because this is part of the problem. We cannot rush through these type of issues because these issues are very profound and they're latent in part of this America's history. So please forgive me for that. But let me say this. I say all that to say this. When we talk about who we want to recruit today, I want to recruit young people today who have had a very different experience in this country than I did. Young people today who have had all variety, different types of friends from the day that they were born on this planet. So for them, those are the young people I'm looking to draw in. Young people who've had all kind of friends, even if they grew up in rural North Minnesota that was all white, they still had access to the internet. They had access to social media. They got friends from all around the world that you don't even know about, and neither do I. Their indoctrination, their socialization into our community is very different than it was for many of us. So who are the young people we want today? I want young people who can embrace diversity and not embrace it because it's a popular thing to do, because it's the right thing to do. They accept everyone, regardless of their sexual orientation, of their religious affiliation. They are sensitive to everything around them. Those are the type of men and women I want coming to my door if I call 911. And it doesn't matter to me whether they're of Spanish descent, of African American descent, or whether they're gay or whatever the case may happen to be. Can they embrace diversity? Can they be sensitive? Can they slow things down? Can, from the sense of how they see human beings with a sense of humanity and see people as being human, that's the type of police officer I want to recruit today. Because I grew up in an era where we had to learn 40, 50 years later that the things that we were taught weren't right. I want young people coming into this profession today who are already scripted for these roles, who understand the importance of humanness, of kindness, but at the same time, I'm going to train them to protect themselves so that they can protect us. That's what's important. And I didn't mean to prolong that.
Oh, no,
but some of these things have to be put in a context for us to be able to grasp and understand the challenges that are in front of us today. So thank you for that time.
Deputy Chief? Yeah.
Sure. For us, we do a character hiring. What that means is that any kind of interviews we do, we seek for what kind of character the person has. I can teach all of you how to use these tools. These are tools that help us to do a job. But I cannot teach you to have a good heart, to our core values. And regardless that maybe you're a juvenile and you had some problems growing up, and you make bad decisions, but you can still become a police officer, and you have that servant heart, and you have character to decide when is the right thing to do and step up when is the right time to step up. That is what we're looking for. So those are the people that we go searching, and that is the process in our hiring that we use those kind of questions.
I have two more questions before we're out of time. This one is from the audience. This person notes in the DOJ report, and I think even before that, there was a focus on behavioral health crisis response teams as part of policing. And I know that, again, this conversation has largely been about the work of policing has changed. The work of public safety is not one thing. It is not just sort of responding to crime. This is asking how are we growing that work of behavioral health crises, and whether that is something that your jurisdictions are doing, and whether that's something that you're trying to steer more towards, both as a response to what we're talking about here, but just in general as a change to the practices that we've been seeing.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's going to be so important to policing in the future in terms of the population which we engage out on the street. In this country, there's literature out there that suggests, and the sheriff can speak to this better than I can, over 40, 50, 60% of the people who are incarcerated in our jails across this country have a mental health issue. And where do we take them? We take them to jail with no treatment, no resources, no help, no nothing. And these jails end up with a lot of these people who are not being treated for a variety of different psychological issues, including, i.e., drug and alcohol addiction, which is a DSM-5 diagnosable disease, mental health disease. So I say that to say that, yes, in the city of Minneapolis, we do have a behavioral crisis response team. We are, the number's very small, but we understand the importance to be able to utilize that resource when those calls come in from 911 to try to get to those individuals who are more equipped to handle those types of things, because there's nothing on my tool belt that is equipped to do that. But I need people who have the training, the necessary mental health training to engage those individuals who may be in crisis. And you're going to see that grow. And as a result of, and one of the recommendations actually out of that DOJ report is that for us to expand our behavioral crisis response team, which we are in the process of doing.
Sheriff?
Yes, so, first, yes, I will speak to the jail. One of the things I say is that we don't send out invitations and say, please come to our jail. That's not how it works, right? People are brought to our jail for various reasons. So we know we can't control on the front end who's in our jail and then what they got going on, whether it's chemical health or behavioral health or anything like that. So we brought the services to the jail. I'm proud to say that Hennepin County Jail, we have the MAT program. That's the Medical Assisted Treatment Program, because we cannot continue to see people deteriorate while they're in our custody. We make a conscious decision not to contract out for our medical and psychiatric services. We work hand in hand with Hennepin Health, some of you know as HCMC, to make sure that we have people that already work in our community that know the people that are within our communities, and it just helps with not losing information or people being lost through the cracks. In addition, we work very closely with a different division of Hennepin County, which is Hennepin County Behavioral Services. We have 2 social workers that are embedded in our jail to try to help make sure that we have the right resources as people are released from our facility. We also have an embedded social worker at our dispatch center, so that we have a social worker there that can say, hey, maybe we need to send a different resource other than the police, or just so that they're right there when the calls come in. So there's so many things that we're doing. Yes, there's always something more that we can do, and we're trying. There's this one little thing that's called money that seems to be a barrier sometimes for us getting to do the things that we need to do.
Can I ask you to say more about that? Because you wrote a piece for the Star Tribune just this month, and you talked about the legislature did pass dollars, and yet and I'll stop there and let you sort of finish the rest of that
I
story.
was wondering if I should even talk about that. No, I did an op-ed because there was some language going on at the legislature in which, so as the law sits right now, once someone who's in our care was committed, it was the state's responsibility to make sure that they got to a hospital within 48 hours. That has not been happening. We've had people in our care who should not be there for months. And so there was, I gotta be politically correct now. No, so because that wasn't being done, and again, Hennepin County being the largest and the most populated jail, because that was not being done, well, now the law kind of changed so that we're not breaking the law, or not us, in my opinion. But
So it extended the amount of time.
the 48 hours is no longer there, and now people are, the state can prioritize who goes where and when. So my fear is the sheriff the sheriff and oversees our jail are our numbers of people who need a higher level of care that cannot be given in a correctional setting. Our staff are security staff. They are not psychiatrists and psychologists. You know, if you think, when we talk about staffing shortages, if I have someone in our custody that requires a one-on-one attention just so that they don't harm themselves or anyone else, that further depletes our resources. So, you know, so yes, I did write the op-ed in hopes, like, people need to be aware of this because, again, we don't offer invitations. But at some point, we need to be asking, how much are we putting on specifically law enforcement and corrections? You know, we are being forced in ways legally to do things that we should not be doing. And then when something goes wrong, it's not if something goes wrong, but when something goes wrong, well, then it's our fault. You know, so yeah, it's very difficult when, you know, so now we're gonna have to figure out, because it is our duty to make sure we do the best we can to take care of people that are in our custody. It's like, I can't change that, but you know what, I can't stay stuck. Okay, it happened. Now, how can I make sure that I still deliver the best amount of care? And that means that that's going to be me asking for more partnerships. How can we do this? Because we cannot afford to just be upset by that change and do nothing. People, every life matters, and it is our responsibility to make sure we do the best we can always with whatever cards we're dealt with. And so I don't know how we're going to do it, because it's already happening, and if it happens more, but I'm going to have to figure it out. So.
Well, yes, and that is a perfect tee up to actually the last thing I wanted to ask each of you, which is, as you noted, you're looking to partner and work with community. You want these citizens, people who are watching, anyone who listens to this later, to feel a part of what is happening. And so I guess the question is how exactly to do that. And, you know, if there are specific tangible ways, if people want to help, if people have a frustration, if people are upset, if people want to sign up, what are the ways that you would invite people to be part of this work in a way that is proactive and meaningful?
I can start. If you're in my side of the river, or any side of the river, it really truly doesn't matter. I have 2 action items, if you want to call them that way. One is be the voice. Each of you have a voice. And sometimes the negative, louder voices are the ones that take over everything. And they're the ones that they are driving the media, right? Because what is the job of communication? Sometimes the media, the mainstream media, is a business, so they have to sell stories. And sometimes they like to sell the negative stories. But they're not all negative. There's a lot of really good. So if you are the voice that supports and keeps your police department in check and supports your police department to do better, I invite you to be that loud voice and invite you to be more involved in things like that. So citizen police or civilian police academies in your jurisdictions, maybe they need volunteers to do something. Just be part of it so you can understand where your police department is coming from and what are they doing. And then the second thing for me is see beyond the badge, see beyond this uniform, right? When I take this uniform, I have to pay bills, I have to brush my teeth, I have to have bad hair day, like today. You know, I have the same anxieties and joys that you have. So give us some grace. See us like with some humanity, because this is a profession, this is a career that is not different than ones that each of you chosen to do in your life. Is a calling, right? But that is not who you are, and that is not all you are. So any police department, doesn't matter who they are, Minneapolis, the Sheriff's Office, Hennepin, Ramsey, or my department, we are here to serve. We're not perfect. We will never be perfect. But we are trying to make sure that you are getting the best service possible. So give us some grace.
So my whole 6 months in office, no. Transparency is big, right? Because in order to have trust, you have to have transparency. So some initiatives that I've already taken place is I have my Sheriff's Community Advisory Board. And I was told that I have too many people on my Community Advisory Board, but again, Hennepin County is the biggest county, and if I don't have every lens at the table, then I'm not really serving all of Hennepin County. To take that a step further, making sure that I didn't have yes people. I need people to challenge me. I need people to be able to have that two-way communication on what's going on in their various communities, whether it's the city or the rural parts of Hennepin County. You know, I am very entwined with our youth. For the first time, we're going to have a student advisory board, which I sent letters out to all the superintendents of every district in Hennepin County for sophomores and juniors to have that direct connection with the sheriff, because we know that they see things very differently through their lenses, and we need to start helping them more with being able to make sure that their voices are heard and how they're affected by our adult decisions. So that was an addition. I spoke earlier about our COPA unit, our community outreach and public affairs, making sure that they're out there not just responding to calls, right? And so when we talk about staffing shortages, what that does is it takes away from us our ability to be proactive. And let's face it, if we're not proactive, when we are responding to things, it's typically negative. It is typically negative, so we have to make sure that we're intentional. As short as I am, and I've been told that, you know, we don't have enough staff, we're going to have to make it happen because we have to be proactive, especially now. That's when the relationships are built, and it has to be very intentional. Furthermore, wraparound services with the jail. You know, I'm big on jail programs. Our initiative was starting our HOPE program, helping others by providing education. Bringing people from the community to help us offer educational services to our incarcerated population was very important. And now we're building on that. How can we do a wraparound service with maybe like community substations? Because we know when we release people, not all of them have the resources that they need to do better. So, you know, I often tell people, you know, we have to be done with that's not my job, that's not my job. Our jobs have got to overlap because we lose so many people between the cracks. And so, you know, when we're talking about engagement and transparency and trust, it's not a goal, it's continuous. You have to continuously be doing that because when things go wrong, those relationships should already be built. Because if they're not, people tend to feel like they were used. And no one wants to feel that way. So making sure you have the right people surrounding you, not just yes people, but people that are going to challenge, and you allow for those conversations to take place. Because you know what, you put a lot of good ideas and bad ideas in that same pot, you're going to come out with a very good solution because everyone had a say in it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll be very short here. Kudos to everything both the sheriff and the deputy chief stated. And I'm going to say this, and this is it for me, is role modeling is the best thing that you could ever do. Being able to role model what it is we want young people to do and be. Just like you have lingered onto, you listen and lean over to every word that have come out of our mouths on this stage. And hopefully we have a role model to you, the kind of actions that need to be taken to help make our communities better with your help. And I say this to chiefs, I say this to assistant chiefs, I say this to to personnel up and down the chain of command. It's role modeling the type of behavior that we would like others to be able to carry out, and always being aware of who we are, where we are, what we're saying, how we're saying it, because these young people that are sitting at this table right here are the future of this city, they're the future of public safety, and they're the future of this country. And that's what's important. So thank you for being here with you this afternoon.
On that note, can we thank these three panelists for coming up and answering these questions? Deputy Chief Barragan, Sheriff Witt, Commissioner Alexander, thank you all so much for coming and sharing your time with us today and answering our questions. Thank you all so much for coming and joining us here at Westminster at the Town Talks. I'm going to turn it over to Samra to do a quick thank you and goodbye. And I think that, yes, thank you so much. So a quick round of applause, Samra.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Samra Sharif. I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director of Twin Cities Diversity in Practice and WILD. I just want to again thank Tane, to thank Deputy Chief Barragan, to thank Sheriff Witt and Dr. Alexander for joining us this afternoon. They spoke to some real So we heard about the problems and the solutions and the future of what public safety looks like in our city. And so I just would really like to thank them for their time, their thoughtfulness, and for being here with all of us. Events like this could not have been possible without an amazing team. I would like to thank the WILD and Twin Cities Diversity in Practice staff, especially our program manager, Linda Zhang, who's in the back there. If you don't know, it is a lot of work to get 3 busy public servants to get together at one day and time to speak to you. So I just really want to thank my staff and Sophia Leva, Sid Clark, Kiana Harvey, and Liz Niemer. It takes a whole village to be able to do what we're doing today. I also would like to thank the Westminster staff as well. I heard that Keith and Mary were really instrumental in this program, so thank you for your work as well. And I would like to invite all of you to come to our next event. So WILD is focused on working in several program areas, one of them also being education equity. On July 25th, it's a webinar program. We will be shifting gears from public safety to talking about education equity, specifically about the inequities that we face in gifted and talented programs here in our state. We are partnering with the Southern Minnesota Regional Legal Services, and we're going to be talking about some of the racial disparities and other disparities that students face in entering and being a part of gifted and talented programs. So please join us online on July 25th for that program. Follow us on social media to learn more about our programs and events. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, I don't think we're on TikTok yet, or on LinkedIn, but you can find us there. And if you are interested in supporting our programming, you can donate to WILD. Westminster is also collecting donations, but if you found this program helpful, if you found this interesting and valuable to you, please support our future programming by making a donation to WILD and to Westminster. But thank you all for being here this afternoon. Happy Pride, happy, what was it called, Swift Summer. All the things that are happening in Minneapolis and St. Paul this wonderful summer weekend. Be safe and stay cool. Thank you, everyone.